It is overtime here at Old Favorite Friday, where we're continuing the discussion really about Orval, another classic. I mean, as classic a beer in a lot of ways as you can imagine. I am here with the Belgian beer whisperer. I don't know what that means, but I love saying it. My partner, brewmaster Bill McFee. Bill, anytime we talk about Belgian beer, I know a lot about Belgian beer. I have been a partner here at the brewery for over 8 years old. I've brewed a lot of Belgian beer in my life. I love the styles, but my knowledge just pales in comparison. I'm like an A-ball level knowledge, and you're a major leaguer. So we're bringing in the big guns, talking about Orval, talking about a classic Trappist Belgian ale with Brettanomyces. Give me the lowdown, man. What's this beer all about?
So, first of all, Kevin, you've picked one of my very favorite beers in the whole world. I mean, I just love this beer. I think it is truly a classic. As you mentioned, it's a Trappist Ale, which in some ways makes it special. It's special in a lot of ways, honestly. The color is beautiful. The aroma is beautiful. So what I know about this beer is the following. I've been to the monastery once. They rarely let anybody back in the brewery, so I couldn't even get back in the brewery to see them make the stuff, although I was with a friend who'd been back there. And I know a little bit about how they make the beer. It's first of all, it's the only beer they make, kind of unique. I mean, you got this huge brewery run by mostly a bunch of monks, and they make one beer.
I was going to ask you about that because most of the Trappist ales, there's at least a couple brands, if not many.
At least 2 or 3 or 4, sometimes,
And sometimes we only get maybe 1 or 2 in the States, but they make tons of other stuff.
Right.
This is the only beer they make.
This is the only beer. There's a slight exception to that.
Okay.
They make a version for the monks that you can get only on site.
Oh, okay.
And it's a lower alcohol version of Orval, but it's still called Orval. But the only beer that leaves the monastery is this beer right here. And anyway, it's special in a lot of different ways. First of all, it's the first, as far as I know, really Brett beer. Brettanomyces, of course, is a type of wild yeast that creates unique flavors. There's different strains of Brett that create sometimes sour flavors. This, as far as I know, is Brett Brux or Bruxellinus, which creates very unique aromas, and it dries out the beer a lot. I think it adds a lot of character to the beer. So you want to talk about what you think about the beer itself?
Oh yeah, of course. So I mean, sometimes when people hear Brett, and there are people that watch this and follow us that know that Brettanomyces is kind of a wild yeast. It can pick up, we hear like terms like horse blanket and barnyard and stuff. But this beer may have a little bit of that, but I just get a lot of fruit. I get a lot of lemon zest. Yeah. I get really pleasant fruit flavors that are given off by this. I think that's a credit to consistency, because Brett is something that can get really, really out of hand. If you are in the wine industry, you don't want Brett anywhere near your wine.
Absolutely.
So you can get an infection, which can be a real pain in the neck. The simplicity of this beer, and we have actually made a beer in the past that was kind of a love letter to this beer. It was a collaboration beer with Seven Sun, where we did not a clone, but for the lack of a better term, we were looking to make a clean golden beer with this kind of flavor profile. I think the beer turned out really well, but when we were doing that, and you put that recipe together, obviously, or at least you and Seven Sun did, it's a simple beer, right? The malt's simple, everything else is simple, but it's the yeast and the fermentation that really makes the difference.
Yeah, and so the way we did it was an attempt to mimic what I understood that Orval does, which is 3 fermentations. They do a straight Saccharomyces fermentation to basically get the alcohol and create some ester.
And that's just regular
regular brewing yeast. And then they do a Brett fermentation, which they let it sit for a long period of time. I think it's several weeks. And then they add more yeast and sugar to do bottle conditioning. So actually, technically, as I understand it, three fermentations going on there.
And it's just, and you can tell from the glass, I mean, you get that pillowy head, and it pours so hard. I mean, as far as like the carbonation level,
it just lasts.
It's one of the beautiful things about these classic Belgian beers, and when you do bottle conditioning, is you get this amazing mouthfeel. You can't really replicate that with draft.
No.
And we have talked about this many times when it comes to our beer, is that, for instance, our triple, it's bottle conditioned. If you get it in a 330 ml bottle, you're going to get a different experience if you drink that versus a draft version. We're proud of the draft version. Draft version's out there. It's here in our tap room. You can find it out in the market. But it's just a different beer.
Right.
And we've seen this also with our Triple Eight that we just put out recently for our anniversary party. The bottle conditioned version is just better.
It is.
It's a better mouthfeel. The bubbles are, I always say they're tighter. They wash over your tongue in a way to deliver more flavor. I love it. You know, it's so important to me.
The other thing I know about this beer is it's dry hopped, which is kind of unusual for a beer that's been made this long, but I guess they may have been one of the early ones. I think the Brits got into dry hopping as well, but they dry hop this beer. So kind of interesting.
Well, the thing is, we talk about the Belgian beers, and we never talk about hops when we're talking about Belgian beer. And we do have something like the triple, which is, what style is this? Is it a Belgian pale ale? What is it considered?
The Belgians don't give a hoot about styles, to be honest with you. They really don't. They could care less. BJCP, nah, whatever. Yeah. You know, they are just into, it's a beer.
Yeah.
And so it's an ale. They call it a high fermentation beer, which classifies it basically as an ale. And other than that, it's it's kind of golden amber, almost amber in color. That they don't care what they don't care what it's called.
I'm reading here 6.9%, but whether or not it's a golden ale, whether it's not it's a pale ale, whatever you want to call it, the Belgian styles, the triple was always known as the hoppiest of the Trappist ales, right? And there should be some kind of hop presence that is actually there that you can taste. But when we're talking about hops and the classic Belgian style beers, and I'm sure that there's a craft movement there. You could probably speak to that more than doing more things like IPAs and stuff. But the hops should be present and they should speak to you in this beer. And I get that. You know, it's a classic hop profile. It's old world. It's got herbaceousness and stuff going on in there. It's not the big tropical hops that we're used to in like hazy East Coast IPAs. But it's there, and it's just one of the influences. There's the malt, there's the yeast, there's the hops, all kind of dancing in there, right? They all give you a little bit of flavor.
Yeah, this beer has got a fair amount of bitterness to it, I think, and of course it's dry as a bone, which I love. A lot of the Belgians love, because I think it makes a 7% beer much more drinkable.
Yeah, and a lot of that is the Brett, right?
Yes,
it's fermenting out
yeah.
those sugars that typically are not fermentable by a typical Saccharomyces strain, a regular beer brewing strain. The Brett can ferment out. Dryness is so important. We always push that. I think we say the term drinkable here a little bit too often, and people are like, well, what does that really mean? Are all beers drinkable? The fact that it's not cloying, it's not sweet, you're not having to overcome that sweetness to taste other flavors. Really, really important. In the classic Belgians, if you're going to your local store and you're getting a local Belgian style ale from an American brewery, not always. There's some great breweries out there. I don't want to misconceive this at all. But in a lot of ways, you're going to find a little extra sugar than you would typically expect to find in a typical Belgian Trappist ale. And I think it's for the worse. I think keeping the beers drier. For style, a quad should be a little bit sweeter, right, but not sweet, right. We go with that. So, in general, these classic styles do that. It doesn't hide so much flavor, and it makes it more drinkable. And you want to go back to it. It's better with food that way. There's just so many positives.
And I think drinkable means you can tolerate it more. The residual sugars leave a certain heaviness, and they leave sort of a coating in your mouth. And I think that's what drinkable means to me. It's you can enjoy more of it without feeling weighted down or like it's too much.
And at a 7% beer, which is not super high, but 7% is not a 4.5% Pilsner, right? This is a 7% beer. Especially back in the day, this would have been a beer that packed a wallop. You didn't see 14% beers every day. But at 7%, and with all these flavors, incredibly drinkable. My glass is almost empty. It's only been 7 minutes of recording this thing, and you can really see. I love this beer. I'm so happy that we had a chance to talk about it. So happy to talk about classic Belgian beers when we model ourselves after a classic Belgian brewery.
Absolutely.
So Bill, thank you for your time. We will see you guys again next week on Old Favorite Friday, on Overtime. Let us know what beer that you think we should be featuring here in the future. If you have an Orval, crack one open, tell us what you're thinking about it. Give us some comments there in the comment section. Poke around, like, subscribe, see all these other conversations we're having about other incredible craft beers. We will see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Got it.
Did it.